Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to another episode of Casual Friday, brought to you by the FTX app. Links available in the description below for all of your mobile trading and portfolio tracking needs. If you haven't done it yet, God help you. There's probably nothing we can say at this point to convince you, but at least go check it out. Support them because they support us. So for this episode, the prodigal son returns. Don, from his trading and social media addiction, has decided to make a short appearance while he enjoys the good life of the market being green while on holiday. It seems like the market gods haven't yet punished you for getting a girlfriend and a bottom entry at the same time. I'm sure we'll get a chance to discuss what the odds of that are. But yeah, welcome back, first and foremost. And I know you're taking August off, and we'll be even, this is kind of the last Casual Friday before you try to take some time off properly. So we'll take this opportunity to talk about stuff. But how have you been? How's life treating you on the other side, outside of the metaverse?
Yeah, perfect. It's been really nice just taking a little bit time off. And yeah, it's good to be back though. I kind of missed it a little bit.
You talked to me about your you felt a strong urge to check charts, social media, and just the whole kind of lifestyle of the last 5 years or however long it's been is still pretty strong. Do you want to talk a bit about that? Because it's not really trading addiction in your case, but it's more just sort of market/crypto, and when it becomes so ingrained in your routine, it's sort of hard to move away from. What have you felt? We'll make this the first 5 minutes a bit of a therapy talk all type of thing, but how's it been? Because I haven't taken that type of break, and now I'm scared to having heard your stories.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because a big part of your day is just kind of gone, and then you have to fill it with something else, which isn't that
Or you
difficult,
feel
but it's
someone else in
still
your case, right?
Jesus Christ.
That didn't take
Um,
long. Sorry, go on.
no, but
I lasted like two
oh
minutes, so you and I
Jesus,
have that in common.
oh God, please stop.
Yes,
But no,
sorry,
it's
back to the
weird.
very serious topic, yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. It's something to get used to, but I could get used to it. It's nice, especially when I know I wouldn't change anything, because just looking at the market, I mean, it's gonna be slow, it's gonna be choppy, so it's not like I have to do much. But it's still kind of weird because you kind of get used to that lifestyle, and then you just stop it. Um, yeah, but I don't really mind it.
No issues? Can
Um,
you still be present, in the moment, undistracted type of thing? Not with the
yeah,
market, but
it's more.
with real people.
Yeah, I think the bigger thing is that I sometimes wake up at night and I'm like, oh, I should go check. And I'm like, no, I don't have to. I
Mm.
wouldn't change anything anyway. I don't have any access. But that's still something that I have, which is just, yeah, I don't think that's going to go away anytime
Mm.
soon. It's just, yeah.
That's a very strongly ingrained habit. The funny thing about I don't have any access, you're doing the Celsius hodl mode, just you have your
Hmm.
coins. Slight difference.
Yeah, I would never give them away to anyone, and I can only encourage everyone else to do the same. It's not a good kind of practice, as we've seen over and over and over again. These so-called professionals don't really know what the fuck they're doing it anyway.
Correct. Also, the market, Bitcoin is up 0.69%. Nice. As soon as I said that, it ticked down. Whatever. Let's talk about the market, actually, because
Mhm.
stuff has been green, market structure's been constructive. On the monthly time frame for BTC USD, it's the 20K bounce, right? The 20K bounce to
Yes.
24K, that's sort of where it's moving towards. If we're talking about really high time frame levels on the monthly, the breakdown from support is in the 30s, and the industry is going to zero support is 14K, right? And we're currently
Yes.
bouncing
Hmm.
off of the sort of previous cycles levels. On the weekly, I think you've made this case so many times that our audience is super familiar with it, that the market is at this previous cycles level, and I remember your squiggly line expecting it to kind of just round out at this level, and that's what we've had.
Hmm.
And for the first time,
Yes.
we're seeing signs of actual momentum and a move away from the level, as opposed to just a painful chop around it. And on the weekly time frame, in terms of resistance and stuff overhead, the monthly is at 35. I think the first weekly level is more or less at 30, 32, right? The kind of
Yeah.
pre-breakdown range. And if you add all the moving average memes, they line up at around 30 odd as well. And then the final note I'll make on the daily time frame is kind of the range that we discussed. And there's also 200-week moving average, but it's in the same spot, the same range high. And as we discussed on the daily time frame, in line with the 200-week moving average, which falls at around 23K, there's that cluster range high, from the initial dump, 15th of June cluster, at around 22, 23K. And it looks like we've had a daily close above it after what looked like a failed breakdown, right? So the market poked above it, really
Yep.
slowed down. You and I were discussing how that type of shift in momentum is really crappy, and how Bitcoin absolutely loves to top on failed breakout patterns. So for a while it looked pretty bad, but then we've had a couple of good days to kind of be back above the range. So all in all, it looks like the 3AC gap is, if momentum sticks, the 3AC gap is next. But
Oh,
that's
I
kind of the
love
high
that
time
meme so
frame view.
much.
It's a great meme. For those unfamiliar, the 3AC gap is basically this portion of selling on the left side, basically from 30 to 20, a lot of which was accelerated by the forced selling as a result of that fallout. And so Don has labeled it the 3AC gap. So we've kind of done the higher time frame
Has
stuff
has
there.
that
Gone.
has that kind of picked up? I
No,
hope it
sorry,
has.
you've got no meme value. It's
Man,
over. But as far as the high time frames go, so that's sort of a quick overview, monthly, weekly, daily. Now that stuff is moving in your favor, etc., do you have A, general views, and B, kind of positioning updates or trade management things that you want to catch us up on before you disappear into the void for another month?
yeah. So in general, high time frame wise, pretty much playing out like I wanted it to. Right? You said you remember the squiggly that I drew? It's pretty much exactly what I wanted. And if it goes up slowly, it's better than if it goes up quickly. So I don't really see any reason to take any action. I have taken a little bit of profit on Solana. So that's something, I guess. The reason is just because I'm not going to be in the computer and I was a little bit overexposed. But yeah, that's pretty much it positioning wise. And market, I don't really see any difference from when I left. It's just better. It's green. So
Number went up, number go up good.
yep, exactly.
That makes sense. And targets presumably the same in terms of like observationally 30k ish BTC reversion, 2k ish for ETH, at least the starting point. Is that all more
Oh
or
yeah,
less in line?
I honestly think my ETH target's higher, so 2.5 at the minimum right now,
Right.
if not 3.
Oh,
I
okay,
I don't
nice.
really want to take any profit on that anytime soon.
So
I
send
think if
ETH.
anything, yeah, send ETH.
Send ETH.
Next month, end of next month, when I get back from holiday, I'm more than happy to kind of look at it again. But until then, I'm just not going to. I've got a feeling just looking at the charts, and I haven't done that in quite a while, but that a lot of people were freaking out in the last few days,
Over.
and yeah, over tiny moves that don't change
Oh, I
anything.
see.
So it's kind of like I'm in a good position where it's like I'm well positioned and I don't really need to do anything. And I think going into the merge, I don't want to change anything either. So yeah, just a normal
Well
kind of
said.
thing. It's the best kind of time, and I said this a week ago. The best time to take some time off, and I still stand by that.
Well
It's
said.
nice to kind of be in position, and then it just keeps on going up. It's like brain dead, but it's really hard if you sit in front of the computer, right? You're just sitting there being uncertain. And then if you're not at the computer, it just seems very, very simple. Because I have said this so many times, right? Even if this is bearish, it's always going to bounce from 20K. I have no idea why that hasn't been more obvious to people. And the same thing is true for ETH going into the merge, right? And going into a monthly support level. So it's kind of like you have to you kind of have to put off your brain and just kind of act on what you've been waiting for. And that's what I've been doing. It seems to have been working pretty well.
Buys the bottom, gets a girlfriend, goes on holiday. Number goes up as soon as he goes on holiday. I mean, Christ, what are we doing here? I made a video as a market update type of thing on a couple of days ago when that Bitcoin range high kind of reclaim took place, and the market moved up, whatever, from 22 to 24 and a half. And a lot of the comments were like, oh my god, cred finally bought, etc., number go up. The most bullish thing excuse me, the most bullish thing about this market is I didn't actually buy that breakout. So what makes me a really good risk manager is that I can foresee stuff going wrong before it actually goes wrong. What also makes me a really bad trader sometimes is foreseeing stuff going wrong before I even have a position put on. It's that kind of dual-ended sword. So no, I didn't buy this breakout. I mean, for me, it was technically a valid setup, but to be honest, it was just a purely discretionary thing that I didn't take it. full stop. I'm not in the business of claiming clout for things I didn't do or misleading the audience, especially, Technical Roundup. These guys have been with us for so long. There's just no point and interest in doing that. And I tend to be very explicit about my positioning. I think I might reconsider that if this dip to 22-ish happens. But I think mentally, I think it's two things, being completely frank. Mentally, I think I'm starting to notice signs that I'm very fucking complacent, to be honest, because the market's rewarded me for doing absolutely nothing since November of last year when I just sold that failed breakout at like 58, 5, 59, 50, whatever, just like under 60K-ish. And since that point, I've been kind of waiting for setups, and they've just all been getting completely creamed. And I think I'm just getting too comfortable with that idea that like outperformance via inaction to some extent has been working so well. I can definitely see that affecting my judgment and me being way too slow to turn the gears and missing out really good opportunities as a result. So that's a bit of self-criticism there. I think the second thing would be mentally, I have a model for when I'd expect kind of a new trend and just really good conditions to emerge. And for me, that's later from a market cycle point of view. Certainly maybe towards the tail end of the year, first couple of quarters of next year, that type of thing. And there's a real risk that I've just married that too much in my head, as opposed to doing what I do and what I'm good at, which is just trading the levels, level to level, not getting caught up, and doing business in areas that matter. So there's a bit of cred roast, giving ammo to the people in the chat and those who watch Weekly Open. But yeah, I just wanted to clarify from like a positioning point of view, especially given you've spoken about it. I'm still sitting on a comfy exit, but I definitely have this feeling in my gut that I'm sort of being complacent and missing out on some worthwhile trades, even if they're not like generational new trend, yada yada, whatever it may be. So the cred cope hours continue. Hopefully the videos are still helpful and stuff, but I just thought, in the interests of transparency or whatever, I'm still sitting on my ass.
I think you're taking unfair criticism there, because everyone that's criticizing has probably shit the bed and just took huge losses on the way down. So it's kind of like, why are you here third wheeling it, or kind of like backseat trading it? I don't really understand, right? As like a viewer that likes the content, I don't really get it.
If you do like the content, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Please do. Please, we need it.
But I think in general, I think a lot of people are very complacent, and I've spoken about this at the lows, right? Because I mean, ETH is up 2x now.
Yes.
And the question is, where do you buy it now? It's at resistance at 1.8k, right? It's really hard to buy at 1.8k. If you could have bought it at 800 or a little bit above 800 just a few weeks ago. And then if that breaks and it goes to 2.6, it's really hard to buy it there, because then it's up a shitload from the lows. And there's never going to be an easy entry again. It's really this kind of thing where you think it's going to be easier, but oftentimes it's not. That said, it doesn't mean that you have to take the ETH trade, because if ETH goes to 4k off of the merge thing, you're going to have a lot of other coins that do the same thing, just delayed. And there's going to be plenty of opportunities. It's just, the thing is, people see ETH go up and they tell themselves, okay, let me not FOMO this, because every time I FOMO, I lose money, and it keeps going up, and then at some point they start buying it at a really bad point, and then they lose money instead of having made some by risking it at the lows, I think. But yeah,
panic buy early or not at all, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think you are smart enough to kind of see the opportunity elsewhere. A lot of people are not, and they're gonna chase this thing at the worst possible time. But yeah,
it's just some self-reflection for the audience's benefit and my own to some extent. Doesn't hurt, and also doesn't help. I've got a bunch of like family stuff and moving stuff and personal stuff on the periphery as well that makes me reluctant to babysit or like trade manage stuff, but whatever. Cope. Enough about me. Let's talk about ETH. So I've actually got a doomer scenario that I want you to confront. Of course I do, right? It'd be typical of me. Yeah. So ETH is up like 100%, right? Like in the context of what most people would still reasonably call a downtrend, as far as bear market rallies or whatever you may want to call them, purely in percentage terms, especially for something like ETH, because we're not talking about like a low cap shitcoin here. Like for ETH, this is a really big move, right? And it's now approaching finally some areas of resistance. So like on the weekly time frame, that weekly swing high from February, the technical roundup level, right? The February 21st weekly candle high between 1.8 and sort of 1.9 ish. So that's kind of a weekly level that we've had for a while. And that's just sort of, I know you for a while had the range low marked out, that down candle before the 12th of July weekly, before that crazy move up as a range low as well. But
Yep.
ETH is like getting there, right? No matter how you sort of slice
Mhm.
it or which level you choose to delineate this type of close to 2K area, Ether's getting there, and it's getting there in like a pretty vertical fashion from the
Yes.
lows, and even in percentage terms, it's like a big move. And also contextually, ETH was the one that was leading this rally from the bottom, as you can tell by the ETH BTC chart, which I'm sure we'll revisit shortly. At the same time, the S&P is going up, and this is still very much kind of a BTC 500 as the meme goes trade, and the S&P has been really strong off of its lows and is now reaching kind of a weekly area of resistance ish. If you're going to start boxing out or marking out potential higher low candidates, I think you have to look at around 4.1, 4.2K, because that's where the last swing high from the week of the 23rd to the 30th of May came in. So even if you just box out that 30th of May weekly candle, that's like an area of resistance at the very least, like structurally. And if you look a bit higher to the left, kind of 4.2 or whatever, it's that entire clustered area that you and I had in Technical Roundup for a while, right? It's like 4.4,
Yes.
4170s, 4.2, whatever. So there's putting all that information together, there's a world in which kind of everything is at resistance off of a really strong move. Like ETH led the crypto breakout. It's up like 100% in what's technically a downtrend into a fresh test of high time frame resistance. And in the same vein, S&P has been really strong off of its lows, and has also, and this has been a very clear technical, like very clean technical downtrend in the S&P weekly. It's now reaching an area where you would structurally expect resistance. So there's a world in which stuff just kind of pulls back from here, and where it finds a higher low, if at all, or kind of what happens. I think we're entering a period over the next couple of weeks where fresh aggressive positioning is going to be really difficult to justify unless you've got like very nimble trade management, because stuff is up a lot, stuff is in a downtrend, and stuff is at weekly-ish resistance in that context. What do you think of that kind of structural argument?
Yeah, I do agree with that somewhat. I think if you look at the weekly chart on ETHUSD, the best resistance that we had was 1.3, 1.4K. And we broke that cleanly, just closed through last week. And yeah, we are running into 1.8K resistance, so it's definitely time to be a little bit more careful. But the thing is, I think there's a world in which we just range a little bit in between 1.4 and 1.8K and just decide the next move from that kind of consolidation. But I also think there's a world in which it's just giga sense. We have the catalyst, we have the S&P strength, we have Bitcoin being up. So it's not really, wouldn't really be surprising if it just giga cent. So yeah, I think new lows are very, very unlikely. I think for the next few months, we're not going to go below 800 or 900. I think that's set, and that's going to look or stay in for the next few months. Worst case scenario that I can see is just us basically repeating what we had on Bitcoin back in 2018, which was a 6K bounce over and over and over again on both ETH and Bitcoin. And that would take us quite a while. So I don't think there's too much risk of it going just straight down. I could obviously be wrong, but I think everything's just set for it to perform well, and it doesn't really make much sense to overthink it. So I'm not going to overthink it. I've just been
Mm-hmm.
looking at the monthly chart, and it's bouncing from all-time high, from previous all-time high. And given it's bouncing from a monthly level, I want to see it go to a monthly level, right, at the minimum. Just makes sense to me. And the next monthly level is around 2.6K. It's still a little bit to go. So that's kind of where I want to see this. If it shows weakness there, I'm definitely going to sell it. Until we get there, I'm just going to be patient.
I mean, that's a
And the thing
colossal
is,
move, right? Like,
yeah, it's a giant move. The
yeah.
thing is, right, and I've seen this advice all over the place. It's take profit early. I think it's stupid advice. Um, it's bear market advice, right? And it's only bear market advice, good bear market advice, if you have straight up selling only. That's not necessarily typical. And in these kind of instances, people just sell too early. And I'm more than willing to just round trip this thing. Sometimes you kind of have to risk it. And I think with a catalyst like this and with a setup like this, just doesn't really make much sense to be afraid to round trip a position if you have a really good entry. Because At the end of the day, you're always going to risk something, right? It's just
Or in my
how
case, you don't.
trading. Yeah, that's when you're not doing anything, and that's not really, yeah,
The same thing.
it's
Yeah, I
not going
agree.
to gain you anything. Yeah,
Yes, correct. Yeah, I'm sure some people take issue with that context, being like, "Well, this is a counter trend bounce. If anything, you should be better equipped to like take profit early, that type of thing." I just think there's nuance there. Like even for a counter trend bounce, depending on where it's coming from, like ex nihilo type of thing. If it's from nowhere or in the middle of nowhere, you should be very defensive about those moves. But if you think you're really onto
yeah,
something and something that could be a very structural type of move, and the levels you don't get to trade like ever, if not particularly infrequently, then that should be reflected in your conviction and your willingness to hold a position, right? Like in general, there
yeah.
should be some sort of relationship between your conviction and willingness to hold. If your conviction is low, your willingness to hold should in general be lower, and vice versa as well. So that's me kind of trying to front run some of the criticisms. I totally understand people who kind of caution to be more conservative on profit taking in this environment, and it's also just a product of your entry. For example, like if you were entering at like 1.5 or something, or you were breakout buying, then I'm sure you would tailor your expectations or your kind of profit taking model because you've got less room to work with. But when you've got more room to work with, round tripping or being more conservative with profit taking becomes, you've got more space for that, both in terms of the trade
Yes.
parameters and also in terms of mental capital. That's why a good entry is such a luxury, because it just gives you that breathing room.
I totally agree. It obviously depends on the context. And
Yes.
for me, the context is we're bouncing from the best level that we're ever going to have. There's nothing better on any chart. And we've had capitulation from big funds, big money just got completely wrecked. So that obviously plays into it, right? I wouldn't say the same thing if we weren't at these kind of levels. But if you have this kind of setup, why not risk it once or twice? And that's the thing, right? There's traders that just want to do business in the middle, basically. So just take the meat of the move. And that's completely fine. But if you want to actually buy the bottom or like close to it, you're always going to have, you're going to buy when it's really, really bad, right? And that's something that you have to get used to. And you don't have to do it, but I just like to do it whenever I get these kind of opportunities. I usually get at least a bounce to sell into. That's why I usually take these trades. And
Yes.
sometimes it doesn't work out and then you lose a bunch of money, but that's the same in any trade. There's always a chance to lose money. So um, I like to do it in these kind of instances.
Well said. Yeah, I think you just have to shift your thinking if you're doing business at extremes. Like by definition, if it starts looking
Yeah,
good, you're not doing business at extremes. And then there's a kind of mental
exactly.
trade-off there. As far as the S&P goes, just on a final note, one of the factors of confluence that you pointed out and we actually wrote about in Technical Roundup, which we should just honestly make an S&P trading newsletter at this point, was the monthly support at 37, 36, right? That type of monthly cluster. That's led to a really big move now. In terms of, I mean, we've got some intermediate weekly support, resistance, as we discussed at like 4.1, 4.2 ish. If I'm looking at the candle bodies, the nearest monthly resistance would be quite a meaty retrace back into sort of 4.3, if not 4.370s or thereabouts. You mentioned on
Yes.
ETH, the logic was if I'm buying monthly support, I want to sell monthly resistance. As far as S&P confluence goes, and we're still very much like tied, at least from the available evidence. Does that logic transfer that you're expecting monthly support 3.7, 3.6? You want at least the monthly resistance to like 4.3, 4.4 to also kind of play out?
Yeah. Pretty
Okay.
much exactly what I'm thinking
And,
there.
and
I
then, I
think it
mean,
makes a lot
that
of
would look
sense.
rough, right? And not look rough, but like that's a point where you really sort of have to be careful because that's kind of
Yes.
peak lower high type of area if this thing's going to continue to be shit, or even if it's going to continue to range, right? Even if there's not going to be any
I
new
think
lows
range
and
is
so
very
on.
likely. Yeah.
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 And every
The
range
thing
has a
is,
range high, right?
yeah, and this would make an excellent candidate for range high. So 4.3 to 4.5, and then it could go all the way back to 3.7. And then we're going to have pain in crypto as well, right? There's a good chance that we repeat, like I said, 2018. Um,
Ugh.
it's just until that happens. You just look at the rallies in 2018, and there were a couple 100% rallies on the way, right? And I'm more than happy to take a 100% rally, especially given, I mean, I have a position in altcoins, and like I said, ETH is already up 100%, and there's room from my entry another 100%, or even from now, there's room, I think, for another 100% fueled rally. Um, and that I don't want more. I don't need ETH to go to 10K or 5K or 20K. I'm more than happy to take that trade and then get out of the way, let the narrative play out, and then see what the next trade is going to be. And if you catch these 100, 200% moves with a decent enough size, you don't have to take another trade that year, right? My year's already been excellent, and prices are much, much lower than they have been last year, obviously. And there's still room for it to go more. And even if I don't take a trade after the one that I've been doing right now, I'm going to be more than happy with my performance, right? And
Yes.
yeah, and then I'll see if next year, if I get another trade like this, I'm going to be more than happy to take it again. Or if I don't, I'm just going to be like, okay, I'm just going to wait it out, because I think there's a good chance that it's going to be really shitty next year, as in rangy and choppy, and there's just not going to be anything to do. So I want to take advantage while I can, and the volatility has been decent. Like, I can't
Oh, for
complain.
sure. I was going to ask
Yeah.
actually your views about volatility more than direction heading into year end. Do you expect stuff to fall off, sort of get a very meaty, mean reversion-y, hated
Yes.
rally, as they say, for whatever 2 to 6 weeks, however long it may be, and then for the last quarter of the year for things to sort of tail off, range, chop, and become much more unpleasant. It'll be one of those ranges, if you're correct, where you feel terrible for not buying the bottom, but there's not enough like momentum or just volatility in general to justify a fresh positioning. It's like eternal range midpoint. Is that sort of in line with what you're expecting structurally?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's gonna cool off after ETH merges. I think that's pretty much, we're just rallying off of that and off the S&P strength. The moment that kind of catalyst falls away, the market is going to be boring again, more likely than not. And I think that's going to continue for next year, and that might even continue for the year afterwards. Um,
Ugh.
so yeah, looking forward to that. It's going to be
Yeah.
more vacation time, and that's why I think whenever you get these kind of trade setups, in these kind of conditions, you either just walk away completely and you're like, fuck it, I'm not going to do anything with this market for the next year or two or three, wait it out. Or I'm going to take this advantage, like every advantage that I can get, to build my portfolio up bigger,
Hmm.
before the next kind of
Trend.
rally begins and trend begins. Yeah.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. As far as altcoins go, I mean, you said you sold off some of your Solana position. That was a
Yes.
rally into the range high at around
Hmm.
50s, right? I'm surprised by how
I
kind of unimpressive. I'm not totally surprised, as we'll discuss, but some of this, I kind of expected a bigger bounce structurally. It's still below its range high at 44. We talked about AVAX as well, which is on the underside of its range at 24. In terms of altcoins that have been moving, I mean, ETC has continued to be really strong. Matic, SNX, and just kind of a weird basket of names, some of which are
yeah, Bitcoin
tangentially
Cash I've seen.
Bitcoin Cash. Yeah, there's like a proof of work, proof of stake type of narrative resurgence around the merge,
Hmm.
but definitely a bit of a mixed basket as far as altcoins go. I still think we're sort of starving for a narrative, or at least very hungry for one, which is why even tangential ones like merge, proof of work, governance, etc., is doing well. Do you care about altcoins at the moment? Have you been in any of these kind of new meta type of trades? And I guess, what's your view on alts in general at the moment?
No, so I didn't take any new positions before leaving, and it's pretty rough, I think, for altcoins if they don't have a narrative. Just looking at the charts right now, they've pretty much completed a lot of their mean reversion, at least the immediate one. If you just you can just go through the list, but Litecoin is up 60% against Bitcoin, right? Or was up. Now it's 50%. And then you have Solana up a shitload against Bitcoin. All of these have bounced strongly and are now just kind of bleeding out again. And I think it's because the narrative is just kind of missing. ETH has the narrative, so it's been a little bit stronger. I don't really think it makes too much sense to over invest into altcoins right now if you miss the bottom, right? If you put on a position at the bottom, you can just hold it if you have high conviction. I still have Solana a bunch, but I did take some profit because I was like, okay, this is stupid. I think it's probably gonna go higher in USD terms still, but I was like, I can't just leave for 5 weeks with a stupidly sized position. So I took a little bit of profit there, and everything else I didn't want to sell. So I still have my ETH, I still have my Bitcoin, Um, like I said, still have Solana, but not like as much as I had before.
Some NFTs.
And some NFTs, yeah, but they're like I've written them off. There's with NFTs, it's just like if you buy an amount that makes you uncomfortable, right? It's just gonna suck because the liquidity sucks, and there's a good chance that they go to zero. So you shouldn't be buying too much of them, I think, portfolio wise. But it can be, it's fun. I like the NFT kind of game. Um, offers offers a little bit something else other than just buying Ponzi coins.
Can't wait for
Buying
the
Ponzi
technical
art.
roundup NFT collection when I finally capitulate. That'll be a great utility, value add, roadmap, metaverse, staking, all the good stuff. I agree with you on altcoins. ETH BTC chart we haven't talked about. I've got the
Yes.
weekly time frame up with a rough range of sort of 0.057, 0.06, 0.07, 0.08 ish, and it just looks like one of those failed range low breakdowns. It
Mhm.
rallied really hard off of that, and now last week it closed above the range midpoint at 0.06, 0.07 ish, and the range high is closer to 0.08. Presumably, you think given the failed breakdown at the range low and now closing above the range midpoint, range high is your kind of logical target for that type of setup, and that also keeps the window open for ETH outperformance as it pushes close to 2K. Is that like more or
Yeah.
less in line with your views?
Kind of, but I don't really see a reason to sell at range high, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
This is more of this is a situation where you sell weakness, I think, rather than selling into resistance, because you have the merge coming, you have a bunch of reasons why this could go up. If that doesn't materialize, it's bearish, obviously, and then you don't want to be holding it. So what I would do if I was around, I would be watching ETH BTC pretty closely, see if it's showing unusual weakness, and then sell. Otherwise, just keep it, because the thing is, this range high has been tested a bunch of times. We had the perfect kind of setup for this entire range to fail to the downside. It didn't. So my bet is on it breaking to the upside after some while.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Bullish
yeah, I'm
until
not going to
proven
sell
otherwise.
resistance. Yeah, exactly. I'm not going
Mm-hmm.
to sell resistance, even though it's resistance, because um, I caught a really good entry. I don't want to ruin it, because the thing is, you sell resistance and it goes down. Usually, often the case, but then also very often the case is that you just miss rebuying and then you just sit there fuming. And yeah, given I'm traveling around right now, I just don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
So I'm keeping my ETH. I think if it shows weakness, that'd be pretty bad. You don't want to see it lose 0.055 again. That's pretty much, I mean, that's range low. If we lose that, if you come even close to that, I think
Yeah.
it's cooked. And then we're going to see an ETH bear market, a really bad one. Um, but right now it looks really strong, and I'm not going to step in front of that to kind of guess where the top is going to be. I'd much rather be exposed until it shows me that I should be selling. And
Hmm.
that could be if it breaks out above 0.084 and then comes back down. It could be that it just gets rejected here at resistance. There's like a trend line resistance right where we are, which is at 0.071.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm not willing to gamble on any of it. And as you can see, even looking through the charts, right? Like I said, a bunch of people have been panicking, even though nothing's been happening. And it's easy to panic if you kind of get lost in the daily time frame or even lower than that, in the
Even
current
lower than the
market.
daily.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah. It's the meme.
yeah, because it's like it's so choppy, right? It's choppy. It's really difficult. The macro fears are still there. People are still telling you that it's all bearish, and that's all true, right? The macro still sucks. Or the market structure is still bearish, um, but the entries are good. The setup is good, and then just trust the setup and yeah, let it ride for a
The
little bit.
entries
And if
were
it,
good.
yes, nowadays
Yeah,
not so much, a little
yeah.
bit worse.
I think
Yeah.
there's just a good overarching lesson from all of that, that good entries make for much easier trade management, especially in low time
Hmm.
frame shitty conditions. And you've certainly been a good poster child for that. Plenty on charts there. Should we look at some headlines? I think that's pretty conclusive. And
Yes.
again, technical roundup, trletter.com, free weekly newsletter, comes out every single week. So go get that. We fixed the website, and we'll have update videos for you, at least from me, into August. Maybe not as regularly as mentioned, sort of trying to take August off for the most part. from a content point of view, but I'll probably still be around coping and finding reasons not to buy. So some stuff to look forward to. As far as headlines go, a bit of a mixed bag. More kind of incompetence, I guess, is one way to put it, from the so-called institutional lenders and counterparties. Babel Finance lost over 280 million in proprietary trading with customer funds, an eye-watering 8,000 BTC and 56,000 ETH, I should say, not ETH. That's a TH sound. And yeah, the troubled firm now seeks to convert hundreds of millions of dollars of debt into equity and raise more funds, etc. You know, they're like the classic distressed finance type of thing. And from the reading this from the deck, presumably which they're using to try to raise the funds, it says, in that volatile week of June, when BTC fell precipitously from 30k to 20k, unhedged positions in proprietary trading accounts chalked up significant losses, directly leading to forced liquidation of multiple trading accounts and wiped out 8,000 BTC and 56,000 ETH. Yeah, is this the substratum of we have so many like viable substratum candidates for this cycle, and it just seems like that move from 30 to 20 just like completely obliterated the industry, you know? And that just doesn't even feel like an exaggeration. It's like everyone worth anything or worth too much, I guess, got completely carried out. And it also goes to show I guess the gross incompetence as far as risk management goes, insofar as the entities which are doing lending, offering yielded products, etc., they're taking your money to give you quote-unquote a risk-free return while they go and blow up and gamble on leverage and go into Ponzi protocols and lose their keys and do everything else. But this is another one. It's massive. This is, these are pretty big sums. And yeah, it's just that same old 30k to 20k move, the 3AC gap, which is never going to catch on. I'm sorry, Don, but structurally it's those same levels. More of the same, Doug. More of the same of a single move just completely nuking an entire business. And yeah, also just add that to the capitulation checklist, right?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because if you remember back, and I hate saying this over and over and over again, but the same thing, the same kind of atmosphere was around when we lost 6K back in the last bear market, where a bunch of people thought we could never lose it. That was, I don't know if you remember it,
Of
but
course.
that was this time where there was a serious discussion whether we could ever lose 6K. And a lot of people were on the side that no, 6K is ironclad board. It's never going to break. It cannot break. It's held so many times, and it's just not going to happen. And a bunch of people got blown out when it broke. And the same thing is true for 30K, right? Where people are like, okay, 30K, that's the line in the sand. Anything below that is just ridiculous. And then 30K broke and went all the way to 18. And people got blown the fuck out. And it's interesting because they really should know better.
Yes.
We've been talking about this ad nauseum, right? Where it's like, this shit can go much lower than you think. It can go much higher than you think. And if it starts going low, it's going to go really low. And if it starts going high, it's just going to go really, really high. That's how crypto works. And I have no idea how these people that manage other people's money can look themselves in the eye in the mirror and be like, hey, this was just unfortunate circumstances. No, this shit is always going to happen. It's crypto. We're going to have the same situation again in 4, 5, 6, 7 years where we're going to go down 70, 80% and people are going to be like, what the fuck, how? But it's every single time it's the same thing. And it just goes to show that they don't really know what the fuck they're doing.
Correct.
It's something that I've realized the older I get, that most people are just winging it.
There are no adults in the room, Don,
yeah, it's just everyone's an idiot. Yeah, yes. Everyone's an idiot.
And they also become more stupid, That's I think the crypto, what crypto exacerbates is that people go through periods where they end up being correct, like a genius in a bull market thing, and they become convinced that they're not idiots and that something fundamentally has changed about markets and they can't be wrong, etc. And so they extrapolate this small window of them getting things right to them never being wrong, and which is super dangerous, and they kind of lose that humility. I mean, this specific case also has some just gross incompetence, right? Like I'm quoting from the article, or from the deck, I think, at this case. A proprietary trading team operates several trading accounts not controlled or monitored by trading department. No trading mandate or risk controls were implemented for these accounts. No P&L was reported, per the deck. And orders from Babel's proprietary trading team were not supported by any term sheets and thus were not recorded in system. I mean, this is just like a black hole, right? It's like you take customer
Yeah.
funds and just gamble with it and hope the market keeps going up and it's okay. It's just grossly incompetent. We heard the same about Celsius, like not hedging any of the impermanent loss or yield farm. It's just insane. Everyone, people are dumb. I hate this. Yeah, I think that's enough about that. As far as more exchange-related news, the U.S. Fed and FDIC accused Voyager Digital of false and misleading insurance claims. I think it's to do with the claim they made that the money you hold on Voyager is like FDIC insured, and that was probably a big thing in making people just put their money on there. The feeling that they're somehow insured or institutionally protected, whatever it may be. And as they're finding out now the rough way, that's definitely not the case. I mean, this is like an extreme version of not your keys, not your coins. Because even when kind of reputable centralized counterparties, which are offering like insurance on top of just their reputation and using these other big institutions to throwing their name in the ring to backstop like FDIC, etc., it doesn't mean shit. If the market craps, they'll still lose all of your money. That's insane. I think it just speaks to the notion you and I discussed, how it's so frustrating that even risk-off crypto participants have been completely shafted by the events of the last few months, right? If you've got UST, you think you're holding stablecoins, it went to zero. You've got your crypto on an exchange, what you thought was passively earning yield, you get shafted. You hold it on a SEX, which says that it's FDIC insured, and you feel really safe keeping your money in there, waiting to buy the dip. You get shafted. Like there's just nothing, no safe haven when in the past few months, and the fact that it punishes savers, not speculators, or I guess alongside speculators, is just unacceptable, vile, and also just reputationally very damaging for crypto.
Yes, I think that's one of the reasons. I mean, it is one of the reasons why I think this is going to take a while to fix itself, this bear market or whatever it is, because you don't really get rid of these kind of. It's not even rumors; it's just truths, but that are just floating around. That everyone is just kind of an idiot, and that crypto people don't really seem to take this serious enough. Um, and it's going to take a while for people to get over it, right? If you've lost your money in a scam like that, or something that blew up, uh, if you don't want to call it a scam, then you're not going to come back next year, right? You're going to come
Yes.
back in 5 years after it's picked up again.
To
I
buy at
think a
the
lot of
top.
people that, yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people that were around during the Mt. Gox times, same kind of story. They had
Yes,
a bunch
yes.
of crypto and they lose it all, and they're like, fuck this. And then 5 years later, they're like, okay, maybe I shouldn't have written it off so soon. I think that the same thing is going to be true for this one. But it obviously sucks, and it's throwing everything
Hmm.
further and further behind where it should be or could be. And it's almost always, I mean, I would say it's always greed that makes this happen, which is really sad
Yeah.
because if you're advocating for a better future, and a lot of these people do, right? It's always funny. These people speak about this rosy future where crypto is just changing the world, and then they go and gamble with customer funds. It's like, what the fuck are you guys doing, right? Very kind of snake-like behavior. You
Correct.
say one thing and then you act another. Very much not a fan. I hate that it is this way. I'm not entirely sure if it's gonna ever be not this way,
I don't
if
think
not
so.
for
Maybe
regulation.
like 10
The
years or
only way
something.
to, yeah, or if we get regulation, and a lot of crypto people are afraid of regulation,
Yes.
and I get why, but we can now during times like these, you can kind of appreciate a lot of the regulation that has been done in the traditional financial markets, because it tries to prevent shit like this. Obviously, it's not perfect, and there's a big reason why crypto exists, but yeah,
We
there's
failed to
advantages and
self-police, right?
disadvantages.
Like,
Yeah,
what more
very
evidence do
much
you
so.
need that self-policing or industry self-policing, whatever, has completely failed? From lenders to centralized exchanges to big firms, whatever you want to call them, it's just like a colossal failure, and an irrefutable one. There's never been a better time to be a crypto cynic, right? You just call it like the leveraged S&P 500 with more insider trading and Ponzi schemes and snake oil and whatever else. So some
Yeah,
fun dinner conversations to be had at Thanksgiving and Christmas and all that type of stuff. Celsius
yeah.
also hit by customer.io email data breach. The headlines never stop, right? So I think it's just like a list of Celsius customer emails was leaked by an employee at one of the company's vendors, incidentally connected to the same data breach that affected OpenSea. So now people who lost all their money in Celsius are probably going to get even more scammy fraud emails from people obtaining that list to lose even more money. I don't know if Celsius can do anything right at this point. Didn't stop the Cell token from rallying like 80% or something though.
Oh,
Talk about
really?
it.
Did it?
Yeah. Cell is up or was up. I can actually check. But yeah, as far as efficient markets go, you declare bankruptcy and your token rips face. It's very crypto.
Yeah, I mean,
It
the
could also
reason
just be
why is
funding
just
related and kind of market structure more so than fair valuation. But yeah, it's up.
it's a
It's
short
up.
squeeze. Yeah.
Yeah. This is what the GME people wanted. They're just getting it in Cell and not in GME and AMC. Yeah, there's like lending and funding related idiosyncrasies there, but yeah, this company sucks. Sky Mavis CEO moved funds before disclosing $540 million hack. The Sky Mavis CEO moved about 3 million in crypto after the Ronin Bridge hack in March. His fund transfer happened before the company went public with the news of the hack. According to Bloomberg, he moved the funds as part of the effort to salvage the company's funds in wake of the attack. Kaylee Moore, a Sky Mavis spokesperson, said this was necessary to prevent short sellers from front-running the sale of tokens once the hack became public knowledge. Just some very quick advice. If you ever hear any type of argument saying we're doing X, where X involves insider selling in order to prevent, like in order to front run or to stop the hacker or something else, just leave, because it's never true and it's always just like a bad sign. And in general, when like as a broader point, when exchange CEOs or devs, etc., start talking about price and short squeezing and punishing sellers, etc., that's just one of the most bearish things ever. It's just such a bad sign that never ends well. The market's always going to do what the market's going to do, and people just, the hubris they get around thinking they can control that is, it never ends well. In this specific case, like typical insider crypto crap, to be honest with you. I'm so tired of this type of stuff, but it's sort of how the industry operates. And of course, they later raised funds to compensate for the loss of, for the hack and so on and so forth. But yeah, this is just like crypto 101. Hacks, insider selling, trying to front run sellers, then just raise money to get yourself out the hole. Thankfully, they did it before the market looked how it looks now. But I'm sure the Axie holders and SLP holders and scholars and the Philippine economy isn't particularly grateful for how this whole thing has evolved. Yeah, this just leaves a lot of these headlines, man, just leave a really bitter taste in my mouth about the industry. I was already super cynical about the overwhelming majority of it, but a lot of the bodies that have floated to the surface in the last couple months, talk about a kick in the gut, right?
I mean, there's a reason why I've been so negative about all of it for the last few years. And we both have seen this shit over and over and over again. And every time you get a new cycle, you're somewhat hopeful that it's better this time around, and it never is, which just gets you more and more jaded. I'm not surprised that a lot of the OGs, or like the people that have been around for a long time, are just Bitcoin maxis, because at least there's less scams there. You don't really have to, like, if you're promoting Bitcoin, you don't have to be worried about promoting the next big scam. Whereas a lot with the other stuff in crypto, oftentimes you just don't know what they're gonna pull off, right? The teams just sit there and then they're like, oh shit, someone else has kind of pulled off a massive rug pull. Maybe we can too, and it's just kind of fucked up. And I don't know if it's ever gonna get better, and it's a really sad situation. I don't think anyone that has been around for a long, long time can be anything but shaded. There's a few people that still have hope, which I really appreciate.
Yeah.
For me, the way I cope with all of this is just seeing it as a trade. I don't really see crypto as this world-changing thing anymore, because otherwise I'd just be sad all the time. I just see it as a trade and then go from there, right? I'm going to make money with it. That's kind of the only goal that I have with it. And then if it becomes more nice, I've been along for the ride and I've been involved. And that's good. If it doesn't, I mean, so be it. I'll move to something else. Which is really sad to say, I think, as like a supporter of the initial idea, and as someone that has been spending a lot of their lifetime on this shit. But it's just the only way that I could deal with this garbage without getting depressed
You got
about
to
it.
be intellectually
So
honest about it.
yeah,
I told you this story when I was having lunch with my friend's parents, and his dad was like, "It's like there's so many Ponzi's, so many scams. Retail gets rinsed on structured products they don't understand, insider trading, market manipulation, etc." I'm just like, yep. No, I agree with you. I think people expect a lot of the time us to evangelize, but a lot of people are here. I'm sure there are some. I think that over the long term, things are getting slightly better It's just every cycle comes with such insane scams and Ponzi's, and the magnitude of those as the market caps increase also become larger. And that's all very hard to stomach. I think overall the super zoomed out trend is up. Like, if 99% of projects end up being useless scams, or complete garbage that didn't make it to the next cycle, that 1% or whatever outlier is left, we end up building something like decent with that, which has product market fit, some sense of longevity, and so on and so forth. That's how I sort of cope with it. But like fundamentally, I agree with you. I'm here for sort of inefficient markets, liquidity, momentum, and kind of reg arb good trading opportunities, and if we manage to build something meaningful beyond that, awesome. If not, then looking at the state of this, you can't even be terribly surprised. Speaking of macro and the real world, US economy declined 0.9% during the second quarter. There's a lot of controversy now about the definition of a recession being changed. Like the Wikipedia article, I think, has been locked at the time of recording this because there's a lot of like debate and revisions and edits going on, and the White House also denying the technical definition of a recession, so on and so forth. I think it's really sad to think that there's someone who took a macro trade where they bought the Bitcoin top to hedge inflation and then sold the bottom when the recession came in, and down like 60-70% or whatever. There's definitely someone who took that trade in my mind. But yeah, I think this just speaks to the fact that, as you mentioned, the macro is still shit. I think expecting a new uptrend, the kind we're used to in 2021, in these conditions is like very unlikely, just as a product of risk appetite and disposable income and whatever else. It's hard. But I think, as you and I have beat to the death, the point that crypto going up at all and crypto entering a new uptrend, those are two very, very different claims. The first one can
Yes.
and is happening in the context of shitty macro and a recession. The second one far less likely. But those aren't the same thing. I think a lot of people got stuck in that thinking that you can't even get a weekly green candle if the macroeconomy looks bad. And I think not thinking that way is probably a good idea, and kind of just taking it trade by trade, level to level, especially when you've got like a lot of wind behind you in the context of forced selling and whatnot. So macro still sucks. Fed still, going to be confident to crush stuff and whatever else. We're not experts here. The big picture in terms of retail coming in and spending stupid money on stupid stuff, that seems still quite far away. But in the meantime, there are still trades to be had, as Don has manifested. What do you think of this economy, macro, whatever stuff?
Yeah, I generally agree with that. I think what really grinded my gears was that people were talking that you can't take a long trade because macro, and I'm just like, this is stupid. This makes no sense whatsoever. Why should ETH or another altcoin, basically like a tiny Ponzi that has just a tiny market cap, not go up if it has a catalyst or something, just because we have inflation or whatever? I think these market caps, people don't realize how small these market caps really are. Um, and so there's plenty of opportunity to kind of pump them if they get too low. And I feel like ETH at 800 was too low. And a lot of these other altcoins had the same kind of thing going for them. And if they ever get low again, this is something that you should think about, because it's always going to be a thing where something is going to be shit. The macro or crypto in general, there's going to be regulations that are going to hit at some point where you're going to see dips afterwards. Who knows who's going to ban crypto next, right? And then you have to look at it and be like, okay, how big is this market cap really? And is this actually justified to go this low? And if it is this low, how much money would it take to pump this shit, and to make people funnel back into the market? And oftentimes, the answer is not that much. And you can see it in ETH right now. It's up to X, even though everything is shit. And that's something that you should not necessarily ignore. You can ignore it. I think it's not the worst in the world, as long as you're consistent with it. And you're just like, okay, I missed this big trade. I can get it the next cycle, or I can get it for the next narrative. But the worst thing that I see people do is they disregard a new emerging kind of narrative, like the ETH merge, and there's going to be one for Bitcoin, and there's going to be one for other altcoins for the longest time, and then they try to jump on it very late. And I
Yeah.
think you're going to get wrecked if you jump on the ETH merge late. If you buy ETH a week or two or three maybe before the merge, there's a good chance that you're going to lose quite a bit of money, I think. So I'm just here along for the ride, basically, until the narrative has manifested itself. And then before it actually plays out, I want to be out of the trade if I
Yes.
can. Um,
Be in early
so
or
yeah,
not at all, right?
yeah, exactly. And that doesn't have anything to do with the macro necessarily. Obviously, it helps my situation that the S&P is bouncing. But then again, that's been we have both talked about how we expected it to bounce from monthly
Sure.
support.
Yeah.
It's done it perfectly. So yeah,
I think you're
I
even
think
being too charitable when you phrase it in that way that, essentially that macro being bad doesn't mean that crypto native narratives at small market caps can make a number go up. That's very reasonable.
mhm.
But if you want to put it into someone's face, like in very explicit terms, their argument would essentially be the S&P can't make a lower high because macro is bad, and then that just
Yeah.
seems so unlikely on its face, and we're kind of seeing that play out. But I agree. I think there's a decent likelihood of just like a rangy lower high, some sort of resistance environment in the coming weeks, and people who choose to like buy the S&P lower high and market long the merge or whatever once everything is up a lot, that's going to be that one of the rougher trades to be had in the near future, like looking for momentum continuation at the top of a very large move at important market structure levels. That's definitely a tricky trade, and it's one of those videos that's weird to make because at least as far as ETH goes and the S&P goes, certainly over the next couple of weeks, the market's that type of area where if you're already positioned, you're comfortable, but for fresh positioning, man, that's a tough sell,
Yeah.
and I mean that's really all there is to that. Do you have anything to add?
No, I think it's all good.
Cool. Kathy Wood's ARK Invest ditches 1.4 million Coinbase shares, which is about 75 mil, based on the price at close on Tuesday. That was the bottom, or close to the bottom, as number was going down. In general, I think the block had another article that Wall Street in general is very bearish Coinbase at the moment and just been revising down their price predictions and so on and so forth. ARK itself looks a bit rough, and Kathy Wood, clearly doesn't like the coins. I get this, but I also just think you have to understand that Coinbase is like an extremely cyclical business, just like crypto itself. Uh, when crypto is hot, Coinbase will be overvalued, and when crypto is shit, it'll be undervalued or oversold or whatever. And kind of making decisions about your allocation here on the crypto industry at current prices, valuations, market caps, etc. This just feels a bit forced and a bit late, you know. I don't
I
I don't
agree.
love this type of setup. I think in general it's kind of insane how the whole ARC story, how it went from being the sort of bull market icon to some extent to what it is now, which is like barely keeping up with the S&P in terms of returns or something like that.
Yeah.
I think I really feel like Kathy Wood is one of those bull market heroes, just in the TradFi world, as opposed to someone on Twitter posting P&L on the way up and then disappear on the way down.
It kind of feels that way, yeah. And I think, in general, I think Coinbase is kind of shit. I've really disliked Coinbase as a company. I think they're gonna go away at some
They're
point,
gonna get Bittrex,
long
do you
term.
think?
Yeah, I think so. I'd be very, very
I
surprised
mean,
if they
they
didn't.
fumbled so much; it's unbelievable, right? You
Yeah,
think about the
I've
advantage they
never,
had; it's unreal. Like they had such a head start, and then they've just flopped and fumbled the entire way, and have been losing
yeah,
enormous amounts of market share despite having such a competitive advantage. And it's kind of sad to see. But it's kind of good for the industry that incumbents who don't keep up get displaced. I guess we've at least got that going for us, right?
yeah, I agree. I think I can't think of any company that I've seen be in this good of a spot just fuck it up so badly.
Consistently,
I'm
yeah.
yeah, I'm actually very, very surprised that it's even possible to fuck it up this badly. Um, Pretty much all the choices that they've made, in my opinion, and this is from someone that hasn't had to make these choices. I don't know if I would have made better choices, but I know that the choices that they have made have been really fucking shit. And so on one hand, I'm like, okay, yeah, it makes sense to not have a stake in that because I wouldn't want to, even at these prices, could be half of what it is right now. I wouldn't want to have Coinbase stock. I just don't think they're gonna stick around. I'd be very surprised. Long term, obviously, it's gonna go up. If crypto goes back up, Coinbase is gonna go up, or like Coin, the the stock. But
There are better ways
at
to
the
bet
same
on crypto,
time,
right, than
yeah,
buying
yeah,
Coinbase shares.
exactly, exactly. If she just bought Bitcoin, I would have been like, yeah, you're probably gonna get away with this. But the thing is that yeah, her buying it in the first place was kind of ridiculous. I think it's
Yeah.
just basically this is such a top thing to do. It's basically like you bought ETH at 200, it goes to 5K, and then you all in NFTs. That's kind of what
That's a
what
good analogy.
yeah, it's just kind of how it feels like, right? She just got high on her own supply, basically, just like sniffing her own hopium and kind of thinking that the everything bubble is just gonna keep on going forever.
Super cycle,
Um,
anyone?
yeah, and then just buying the most outrageous shit.
Yeah.
And I think Coinbase is a good example of that, especially at these kind of valuations that it used to have.
Yeah.
And if you do that and then hold it for like the 75% drawdown, I don't really know her average, but it's down like 70-80%,
It's not
I
good.
think, from where she bought it at. And and then selling it is just ridiculous, right? It just shows that you you were either not really looking into it in the first place, because Coinbase hasn't changed a bit since then.
Yes.
Nothing's changed in that regard. It's the only thing that's changed is that
The
she's
cycle.
not in the she's not in the euphoria phase anymore,
Yeah.
and she's now worried that she's gonna get completely wrecked on this thing. I don't think anyone can sell me that this stock is very different
Yeah.
now than it was a couple months ago. So yeah.
Much closer to cycle bottom in terms of prices than cycle top. And, if you buy the cycle top, you're probably going to be a forced seller at the cycle bottom or closer to it
Mhm.
anyway. Typical. Aptos closes 150 million round led by FTX Ventures Jump Crypto. Don, the new L1 just dropped. The
Mhm.
Solana retrade. And the funny thing is, it's like the blockchain was founded by former Meta employees, that's Facebook, hoping to bring blockchain technology to a wider audience of billions of people, which is literally the whole Solana pitch, right? And
Yes.
FTX Ventures and some others participated. I'm so cynical about layer ones in general. Like I'm so cynical. They just feel like cash machines for rich people, or like those racing
Mhm.
horses that rich people buy and they race them until they get old and then they shoot them behind the barn and get a new one. And we've written
Yes.
about this extensively as far as out layer ones go in Technical Roundup. But the basic premise is when crypto's hot, the demand for block space is high. And sometimes it's too high, which means the cost of because we're shit at scaling and incompetent and super slow, these things don't scale. And as the demand for block space goes up, the supply is still limited as a result of those technological obstacles. And one way to get around that is, some people just pay the high transaction costs if they feel like whatever activity they're doing, buying an NFT, participating in a mint, getting into DeFi, whatever. It's kind of just like a high funding rate. Like they're happy to eat the costs if they think that the PNL or the upside is worth it. However, when it comes to easy to sell normie narratives, it's so easy to like point to ETH, like the base layer, and say, look how expensive this is. We've got something so much cheaper that even your nan with $100 can participate in mint and do this, that, etc. And as a result, in these very short windows, every market cycle, when things are really hot and demand for block space compared to the supply and scaling capabilities is outsized, that's when you get your sort of layer one season that essentially, quote unquote, fixes the problem. We've seen how well that's gone for Solana, but they've sort of fixed that problem, and there's a new narrative emerging of, oh my god, look at all the use cases that we can get with this new form of scaling or whatever else. And then ultimately, when crypto crashes and becomes a fucking ghost town and no one's transacting on anything, miraculously ETH becomes cheap and people just use that because of everything built on it, and all these layer ones massively underperform relative to USD, ETH, and whatever else. And to me, this feels like just another kind of the next version of that. It's running back the same cycle of getting an L1, running that whole block space trade, and it's very likely to fade into irrelevance unless, I don't know, it's got some sort of lindiness or special features or whatever else. But it's the same thing. It's just addressing the the scalability issue, as far as base layer ETH being expensive, and a lot of these things just get fucking abandoned when people abandon crypto, which by definition happens cycle to cycle. I'm so cynical about this type of stuff. I mean, I'll trade the shit out of it, don't get me wrong, because I just like, the momentum liquidity narratives, and it's a proven narrative that works, right? Like, how many cycles in a row, Don, are we going to do this thing where, like, thing that exists is expensive, this is a new thing that's not expensive, so buy it. because it's better.
Yeah.
And you just run it back over and over and over again. And it seems like Solana's kind of lost a lot of favor with the community and incumbents, and also because it's gone through a market cycle and has shitty, it had shitty price performance, tech issues, and so on. Instead of trying to fix it, well, I'm sure they're working on it, whatever else. But like as an investor and especially as a trader, you want the new thing, which has fresh narratives, no cynicism, no bag holders to sell the lower highs, and it just looks like the whole layer one smart contract premise is just going to keep coming back on the different names, different shapes, but with the same investors. That was a bit ranty, but what do you think about this?
Yeah, pretty much the exact same thing. I'm gonna trade it. I like it? Probably not. I haven't really looked into it too much, but it just sounds like the same old, like you said. But yeah, I'm gonna be trading it. Like I said, it's all a trade to me. I'm beyond the point of where I'm like, okay, this could be cool. I'm just like, okay, this is a trade. People are gonna like it, then I'll trade it. If they
Good
don't, I
volume, good
won't.
liquidity.
Exactly. So my kind of my kind of thing is I'm just gonna look at it as a trade.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a really good trade to me. If I get a good price on something like that, it has the right backing. They want to sell high if they can. That's pretty much all I
Yes.
need.
We need future bag holders and volume.
Yeah.
CEO and
And the thing
co-founder.
is,
Sorry, go on.
the thing is with these layer ones and with all the crypto coins, right? If you've gone through a cycle, you have back holders, like you said. And then if you make a new coin, you don't have these back holders, so prices can go much higher. It's much easier for prices to go high if you don't have anyone that's sitting in it for the last 3 years underwater. More than happy to sell at the break even price. So what oftentimes happens, and we have talked about this on the show a couple of times, is that you just have the same shit again, right?
Yeah.
So you just remake a coin, start it over, and then go from there. And I'm not hating on it as long as it's working. I guess makes sense as a business practice, as immoral as it is as a business. It makes a lot of sense,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So yeah.
Unfortunately, agree. And this bit's funny. CEO and co-founder Mo Sheikh, sorry if I've ruined your name, said the latest funding round is an endorsement of the company's work to date and shows the appetite for a next-generation layer one. And he added, "We've known for a while that due to issues like outages and downtime, current blockchains are not fit for purpose when it comes to mass Web3 adoption." Because yes, of course, as we know, this blockchain won't have any issues when people start to actually use it, because that's never happened in crypto's past before, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's just so typical. It's the same playbook. It's the same thing of like millions of users, mass adoption, Web3 scaling. Please buy the token, and then it just, yeah, I don't know, send it to the
Yeah.
graveyard by the time the cycle ends. Very, very bleak and cynical way to end things, but we always keep it real and keep it 100, as the kids say. That's all the headlines I've got, Don. Any final bits of wisdom before you go on holiday and leave us and go enjoy what life's got to offer, apart from Japanese candlesticks on internet crypto, public key cryptography Ponzi schemes?
I don't think there's much to say other than just let it do its thing. I think we're still very much in the same environment that we've been in. It's just momentum's just kind of turned around for a little bit. I don't think that's going to stay that way. So if you're kind of looking for a long-term bottom, um, this doesn't really look like one to me. At least not yet. I think we could easily go to for Bitcoin. We could easily go to 30K, still not have bottomed, or just maybe we have bottomed, but it's still going to take a year or two or three to unfold. Um, which at the end of the day, right, if you bought 20K now, or if you buy 30K in 3 years, I'm not actually sure like which I would rather have,
Well
because
said.
if you're sitting at 20K in your position and you have to wait 3 years and you're going to freak the fuck out because you overinvested the entire time, that's not going to be a fun ride. So I think there's going to be some shitty price action. I could see that happen in the next few weeks, even just from this point onwards, where it's just going to be really shit. The only thing that we really have going for us is the merge. So if anything goes wrong with that, I think it's all going to go to zero, basically.
Right.
As obviously not literally, but this entire kind of upswing is based around that. I think a lot of the altcoin action anyway. So if you're in altcoins, you should be watching ETH really closely. You should be watching the narrative that's been driving this very closely, and But
And the S&P.
otherwise, yeah, the S&P, but I think you should also not be watching price too closely, because if you do, you're going to overtrade this thing, and there's really not that much to trade, I think, beyond just the long-term kind of entries, uh, or like mean reversion, long-term mean reversion. Anything beyond that is just going to be really difficult to trade. This is kind of how the extremes work usually. You think, okay, this is the extreme, so I can take some easy trades there. It's not the case. You just it's a lot of suffering, and it's not easy. And anyone that tells you it is easy is just talking bullshit. So sometimes you just have to buy and close your eyes. And in this case, I'm going to quite literally, I'm just going to walk away from the charts. And but yeah, I just think that makes a lot of sense. Just let it play out. If it goes shit, it goes shit. Don't put in too much, otherwise you're gonna do the worst things at the worst moments. And yeah, that's it. I think I don't have that much advice now.
We'll miss you, Don. Well said. Well said. I think maybe even
I'll miss you
attempting.
guys too.
Yeah, right. I think attempting some sort of summary of that might be, for example, that better prices don't necessarily mean better conditions. Right? You can have a
Yes.
price be higher from here, and the market still sucks, and all the volatility is dried up, and the range is terrible, and so on and so forth. At least that's my cope. So, if you endorse my
Mhm.
cope, then that makes coping slightly easier. That's all from us. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Casual Friday. Wish Don a happy holidays in the comments section. I'm sure he'll appreciate it, and I'll pass him on all your well wishes and screenshots. Thank you to FTX for supporting the show. Best mobile trading app available on the market, portfolio tracking, all that type of good stuff. Get it because they support us and because it's a good app. I will probably see you on month. So no technical roundup newsletter next month, most likely in the month of August. I'll probably do some sort of Monday markets updatey stuff from time to time. So I think there'll be some activity to look forward to. That's all from us for now. Thank you for staying with us and listening and watching and supporting. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff. And Don, happy holidays. Enjoy your break.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone else. And goodbye.
Bye bye.